Hello everybody. My name's Luke McBain with the Leading into Meaning podcast, and today we have Dan Edds as a guest again. And Dan was here once before, and I had a really wonderful conversation with him when you, Dan, just published your book, Cracking the Code of Sustainable Team Performance, Leveraging the Genetics of Leadership. Dan is a keynote speaker and consultant, and he helps senior leaders design high-tech impact cultures of courageous and engaged employees. And the result is that they then crack the code of sustainable competitive advantage. And you can be, of course, found easily on LinkedIn. And I think I'll just post also a link of your bio on LinkedIn, and where you're also very active and always report about your adventures. And that's how I sort of I always follow you there, and I sort of see that you're up to something. And so that sparks my interest. Maybe just to start from the basics once more time, if you could just tell us a little bit about your book again. And last time, we can also post a link to the interview we did on your book, so that if people who are interested can sort of dig into that a little bit deeper. And but for now, maybe just if we can just cover the basics again of your publication, that would be great. I think your camera has now shifted.
Yeah.
Now it's coming in. Now you're back in the picture.
I don't want to cut my head off.
We don't want that. Just your book is titled "Leveraging the Genetics of Leadership." Please, can you just give me a little bit of a little bit about the book, a little bit of a content, or what's your approach like?
Yeah, sure. And thanks, Luke. It's always fun to hang out with you for a few minutes and talk about issues around leadership. And I wrote the book a little bit out of frustration, a little bit out of inspiration. Excuse me, because in my consulting practice, and now I've worked with probably 250 different organizations. I kept seeing this disconnect between what leaders, especially executive leaders and managers, said they were all about and what they actually produced. So, very common conversation. I go into an organization, and we're just chatting. We're getting acquainted. We're laying the groundwork for the project that we're going to do. And invariably, they will say, "We have the most amazing workforce. We couldn't do what we do without them." And which is quite literally true. But then I would start working with that workforce, and invariably they would be exhausted, demoralized. They were working at the edge of their capacity to do meaningful work. And I kept thinking, where is the disconnect here? And invariably, in working with let's say the rank and file, within the first 4 hours of a team meeting or a group meeting, someone's going to come up to me and say, we've been through this before. And they would say, the problem is they just don't want to listen to us. And of course, I would think to myself, yeah, but they've never had me working with this team. Well, so more times than I could count, I would come back 6 months later and, well, how's things are going? And come to find out, nothing had changed. Organization spent a lot of money on me, spent a lot of time with staff, and yet nothing had changed. So I got thinking about, why is it that this is actually a very common practice in the consulting world? There's actually a formal name for it, which I forget at the moment. But I got looking at, well, what do the best organizations, how do they approach leadership? And I discovered that it was very, very different than what I was reading about in all the books on leadership. They didn't approach it at all like the traditional books on leadership that you read, where you hear the stories of, quote unquote, great men and women. They approached it very systemically, in a very measured, design, practical way. And they would coach and teach and train every one of their managers to a system or to a methodology of doing leadership that invariably provided the workforce a transformative place to work, and they produced enormous value for their customers, to the point where in many cases customers were quite literally standing at the door waiting to do business with them. So that's a long-winded story of how I got writing the book.
Not long-winded at all, but rather interesting. So if I understand you correctly, your observation is that when we talk about transformation, we usually, I'm just paraphrasing now, but please correct me. We're talking about organizational transformation, organizational development, all sorts of ideas come to mind, like training and strategy and change management. But we very rarely talk about, well, we also talk about leadership development, but what you're saying is we have to talk about leadership development and leadership transformation first before we address all these other things. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that?
I've never put it in quite those terms, but yeah, I think that's very true. Or at least leadership transformation, if it doesn't precede organizational transformation, it certainly is going to happen simultaneously to that. But I think there's a lot of logic to say that leadership transformation has to happen first, or at least be a step or two ahead of the organizational transformation. I mean, think about it. And I think this is one of the reasons why organizational transformation never happens, is because organizations don't make the connection between the transformation that they're looking for and the kind of leadership that has to be in place to make that transformation work.
Right. And I mean, one of the reasons I sort of like, there've been a couple of years since we talked last time. And one of the reasons I sort of like went immediately, I need to talk to Dan again, was I had a couple of years now also of consulting experience in the public sector, civil society, organizational development. And my takeaway from that is now exactly the same. It's like without leadership development, maybe you're doing like 30% of the work. Right. And you get 30% of the outcome. Like if you just ignore that part, like, and I think forward, my recommendation would be to others, the decision makers, please include that, if possible, as a prerequisite, as something which always runs in parallel or has to, be prepared in a certain way. So that's amazing that you were ahead of me basically in this regard.
Well, so let me give you just a real simple example of that. Since we've talked, I started working on a PhD in systems thinking through the University of Birmingham in England, and I'm going to be developing this theory of leadership, systemic leadership, systems thinking around the whole concept of leadership, and so the way I'm going to test my theory is in healthcare, which as it turns out, healthcare is, there's a lot of people that die because of healthcare, because of errors and mistakes in healthcare. World Health Organization estimates that 3 million people die every year due to errors in healthcare. So in the last 20, 30 years, patient safety has become a really big deal in the medical community, and rightly so. Here in the States, somewhere between 120 maybe 200,000 people die every year because of errors within the healthcare system. So what happens when an organization makes a big pronouncement? Well, we're now going to focus on patient safety. You could have all of the medical processes and procedures in place. You could have, you could error-proof every surgical procedure, every medical procedure, and yet what's invariably missing is that organizational piece, where the leaders of that organization not only have to get on board, but they have to actually lead in such a way that safety becomes paramount, and everybody in the organization, from the CEO all the way down to the janitor, understands their role in making that organization safe. So, simple example. Last August, a report came out of Florida. Elderly couple were visiting their vacation property on the coast of Florida, and the gentleman, he was early mid-60s, I think, started to feel a pain on his left side, kept getting worse and worse. Finally went to a hospital, it was local, and he was diagnosed with essentially a spleen that needed to come out. So they had, he went into surgery. It's a common surgery, happens all the time. Now the spleen is a avocado size organ that's on the left side of the body. The surgeon began to operate on the right side of the body and ended up cutting into his liver, which is a very large organization. And basically his surgery triggered massive bleeding, and the man bled out basically on the surgical table. So question becomes, was there nobody in that surgical room that could see that maybe he was operating on the wrong side of the body, let alone the wrong organ? Was there no nurse, no anesthesiologist, no medical technologist that saw that maybe there was something that was going on that was wrong? And what was the dynamics of the interpersonal relationships between that surgical team that did not allow for someone to say, hey, stop, wait a minute, let's not go on, something doesn't look right? And that's where that issue of organizational leadership comes in, because in a safe working environment, people have to have a level of self-confidence that they can speak up and say, I see something that's going on that's not right, and be free from the concern that someone's, the whoever is in charge isn't going to yell at them and say something derogatory. And that's where that leadership development piece comes in, where organizations vertically and horizontally all need to understand that there's a role for every leader and every manager in that organization to create a safe working environment. And that's more than just error-proofing processes and procedures. It's also creating the atmosphere and the environment where people are being encouraged and developed to be more self-confident, so they can speak up. It's helping people operate in an atmosphere that's free from fear, and it's helping everyone to understand what's the most important value we can deliver to our customers, or in the case of healthcare, our patients. That's all about organizational leadership. And in reviewing the literature around patient safety in the 30, 35 years people have been measuring this, the measurable improvements in patient safety are really negligible, very, very small. And I don't think it has anything to do with lack of medical awareness, lack of medical technology, lack of medical training. I really think it has everything to do with those larger organizational systemic issues. And that's probably the next, I think that's the next frontier of patient safety. And frankly, in any organization where you're looking at trying to maximize the value that you're trying to deliver to your certainly your customers, but also the value you're trying to deliver to your employees as well.
Yeah, and now comes, of course, an interesting question: is how to get there, right? So, I mean, one part is the value proposition, which, you know, probably a lot of people would say like, oh, that makes total sense. Yes, let's do that. And
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm rolling back another 2 steps and saying maybe you first have to get to the value proposition, understand that's actually the future value we would like to have, and we would like to shift our organizational culture. That might be the first step, right? So even coming to that point, maybe let's talk about this point. Let's say, okay, let's say the organization has even the awareness that there needs to be a shift in culture. Have you ever, like, what's your experience there? Do like businesses, organizations, do they have this kind of self-awareness that there's a need to be there needs to be a shift in organizational culture? Because only if there's a need you can respond as a consultant. Like only if you're asked to, we really need to change something here, and then you go like, okay, that's so. Yeah, please, tell me about that.
Yeah. I think the awareness of that essential value that we want to deliver to our customers is, I think it's one of the most least understood things that organizations struggle with. Like I said, I probably worked with 250 different organizations. If there were 5 of them that really understood the value that they were seeking to deliver to their customers, that might be a stretch. Banks say, well, the value we deliver is, financial transactions. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The hospital says, well, we fix broken bones, we do surgery, we make people healthy again after they've been sick. Okay. But there's always something deeper that's behind the scenes that, in fact, if they understood that, they would understand more about what their real purpose is. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So, well, even locally here, it's a local hospital where I actually get my own care. For the last probably 15 years, they've been recognized as one of the safest hospitals in America. They are abundantly clear that when they say our number one priority, or the number one value we want to deliver to our patients is safety. They make that the priority. And then they measure virtually every process, every procedure, whether it be something in the operating room or the financial office. Everything is measured through that lens of safety. Give you another example, manufacturing company that's actually profiled in my book. It's not too far from where I'm at right now. In their organization, they make the identification and elimination of waste the number one thing. And because they want to deliver to their customers a long-term, ever increasing value for their customers. So every year They want to deliver more value to their customers than they did the prior year. And so they make extracting waste out of their manufacturing processes like the number one thing, because they want to deliver ever increasing value to their customers. And as you might guess, they quite literally have customers knocking on their door saying, can we do business with you? And they have enough business where I find this interesting. They have a 10-point question. See, it's like a 10-point scale that customers have to come up to a certain threshold on that scale before the company will actually do business with them. And it's things like, do you pay your bills? Yes, okay, that's fairly standard, but what are your values? Do your corporate values match our own? And and because they're delivering more value every year, like you look at their client list, and they are all national and international brands, and they've been with them for years, if not decades. And so that awareness, that understanding of what's that purpose, what's that core value we want to deliver to our customers is absolutely critical. And I think it's largely overlooked because it doesn't happen. You don't make those decisions overnight. I think I've seen an organization, it'll take years to figure that out. But once they do, there's something that's magic that happens, because then it unites everyone around that one thing that they're going to deliver to their customers. And there's another side to that that's similar to it. And that's the value that we want to deliver to our employees. So if let's say a hospital again wants to deliver an experience of safety where patients can trust not just their doctor, but the whole organization, logic would suggest that same value of safety probably needs to be delivered or experienced by the workforce. So if the workforce is operating in a state of fear, they're really not going to be able to deliver a experience of safety for their patients. So a hospital, again, as an example, if they want to deliver safety to their patients, they'd probably better figure out that, we also need to deliver a lot of safety for our employees. So when they walk in the door, they feel psychologically, emotionally, and physically safe. And in healthcare, I say physically because it's safer to construct a hospital than to work in a hospital, at least in the States. Healthcare as an institution is not a safe place to work, and there's all kinds of reasons for that. But so to match and to marry these ideas of the value we want to deliver to our customers, and then align that with the value we want to deliver to our employees it's magical when you see it. I mean, it's really stunning when you see it.
And I guess a lot of, transformation exercises would probably miss that point. The employees would also have to experience this value, and how can they experience it? And that would be a big question. Right. Coming back, what you said was very interesting, that not many organizations reflect very deeply on the value which they provide to their customers. I'm surprised to hear that, especially from somebody like you who has all this kind of experience in your life, because I'm just surprised, because one would think, well, especially public sector organizations would have to understand because it's not about a bottom line, it's really value to societies, and they should have a clear mission statement about that. And the other part is, now with all this customer data, which is being collected all the time, whatever means, you should think that you have all sorts of data ready at your fingertips, understanding who your customer is, why they come, and what they're seeking, what value they're seeking out when they, want to work with you or purchase products and all that. So it comes a little bit but I'm just gonna, I believe you, because I experienced similar things, not quite the same, but coming from you, I think is quite a statement. So the first step would be, is the organization even aware what that it, yeah, that it provides value, and what is the value it's providing to its
Right.
customers?
Well, I've done a lot of work in the public sector as well. So let me give you one example. I've done a lot of work with a large state agency, and they've got like 40 or 45 divisions, and each division provides the business licensing for various professions and disciplines. So, for example, I've done work for one of the divisions that provides the licenses for nurses to operate within the state. There's another division for dentists. There's another divisions for, physicians. There's divisions for car mechanics, And I was doing a project for the division that issues license for nursing. They provide like 450,000 licenses every year for the nursing profession. And now there's two broad ways they could understand the value that they're delivering to their customers. Well, first of all, you have to know who your customers are. Well, are they the nurses or are they the general public? And what they had fallen into, and I think this is extraordinarily way too common, is they had the understanding that they were a regulatory environment to keep bad nurses out of the profession and keep good nurses in the profession. They had really lost that understanding of call it public safety, because if the value they are delivering is public safety, then you have to understand really what you're doing and how it impacts the public and the safety of the public. And frankly, if you're a worker, that's way more fun than being a regulatory agency where a nurse sends in the application for licensing and you have to check all the boxes to make sure they've, had the right training and have been to the right schools and they've had the right experience. That's boring. But when you elevate that value statement up to public safety, creates a whole different dynamic within the organization. And it creates a different dynamic of what you do, how you do it, how you fund it, and what you fund. And I think one of the great disservices that I'm not sure if it's we as the voting public or if it comes from, I think it comes from more of the executive leadership within state and local government agencies, is they don't really think about the value they're delivering to their citizens, their public, and then how that impacts the workforce. The easiest thing for a government agency to do is to fall back into the trap of, we're a regulatory organization. We say yes to this or we say no to that. And that doesn't win them any favors with the public. And B, it becomes a very boring place to work.
Yeah, it's really a very different identity. I mean, one is being a gatekeeper and saying you're out or you're in, and we're going to let you into the club, but you're out. And it's also punitive. You don't fulfill the criteria, you're out of a job, basically, and we reward you for filling out the criteria. So, and the other one is more, well, if you're the right match for us, you're going to be a partner in what we would like to achieve, which is public safety or quality of care, and welcome. And well, if you're not, you can't work with us. So that's but we believe maybe you can become better in what you're doing and just rise up to the standards which we believe in, and you can be our partner in the future for, as you say, other opportunities. Subject.
Yeah, and that's really a great way of looking at it. So instead of the state agency being a punitive regulatory, you're in or you're out organization, to switch to that, let's call it the broader context of public safety. Now we're partnering together. And in that organization, if I'm a nurse, this state agency is partnering with me. We are working together to create safety for the public. And everybody understands that. And even as a nurse, now I have that mindset of, oh, part of my job is to keep the public safe. Now, I might be doing, blood, doing the blood work for someone walking in the door for your basic annual physical. But still, if I have that mindset, that's part of the way I'm thinking is, oh, part of my job is to keep the public safe. Well, now all of a sudden, I'm not just putting a needle in somebody's arm. I want to make sure I put that needle in that arm correctly, that I've got the protocols in place to make sure it's done safely, that I've done the necessary pre-work to make sure I'm not passing on an infection to somebody. So that just that simple shifting of the mind to, oh, public safety, that's a real deal. I'm not just sucking blood out of somebody's arm. I'm going to do that in a way that makes sure that that's the safest experience possible for that patient.
Right, and as you said, it broadens the horizon, because that nurse might also say, well, what environment is this happening? It's not just about me. I'd like to be the patient. So yeah, I mean, now we sort of laid the groundwork and the understanding why that is so important, and how it affects how people work. And you already said it's a shift in mindset. And let's move on to like the nitty gritty of this, and the let's say the challenges, if they are, or maybe you see it differently. Like how now to shift that mindset, or what is your experience? Because I think not everybody, but a number of people say, well, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and don't, there's no to even work with culture because you can't change it. So I've already been in a seminar recently where they say, just forget about culture. We're not going to change it, bother with it anymore. Now, but I agree more with you actually, that this is the if you don't challenge the culture, if you don't work with it, if you don't assess it, if you don't become aware of it, as we discussed, the other work becomes marginalized. So other transformations.
Yeah.
How do that?
Yeah. Let me. This was an idea that I have seen in the past, and it really didn't make sense to me until I was doing some research for this PhD maybe 6 months ago. I was actually reading a German sociologist who said in one of his books, is a social system, that there's a language that goes along with every social system. And when I read that, it struck me. I have seen the idea of language several times, but I never knew quite what to do with it. So I'll give you a couple examples. So manufacturing company that I referenced a few minutes ago. If you're to walk in that door and if you're to take their tour, what you would hear is that you would hear people referring to their boss, their manager, the president, not by a title that says you're my production manager, you're my president, you're my CEO. You would hear them referring to their supervisors as mentors. They intentionally switched the paradigm of leadership from being, I'm going to tell you what to do and make sure you do it right, to I'm going to be your mentor to help you in the process of process improvement. My job is to mentor you in your growth in the company. My job is to mentor you in the training that we do to make sure you're getting the training that you need, but also that you want. And so changing that language from, let's say, generically boss to mentor creates an entirely different dynamic in the organization. And it creates an entirely different relationship between supervisor and those who are being supervised. Give you another example. Happens to be one of my favorites. Now, here in the States, we have the United States Navy has a they call it's a precision flight team. And here in the States, they're real popular. Where I'm from in Seattle, every year they come through town and they do a big flight show, and they fly F8 twin engine F-18s, and they do this incredible demonstration. And I live fairly close to where they're doing their flight demonstrations, and they will, as they get set up for their various runs, a lot of times they'll fly right over my house, and there's nothing like seeing 3 or 4 or 5 F-18s. They're close enough that you could see the pilots in their cockpit, and the thrust and the power of these jet aircraft is astonishing, and the window shake in the house, and the whole, that feels like the whole earth is going to shake. And on many of their runs, they're flying. You'll see pictures. There are 4 or 5 F-18s. They're quite literally flying wingtip to wingtip with maybe a half a meter of distance between them, and they're cruising along at 450 miles an hour. I'm not sure what that equates to in kilometers per hour, but it's really fast. And after every flight, whether it be a practice or a actual demonstration, the pilots meet together for an hour and they do a debrief. Now, and they debrief everything from the moment they begin, they line up in formation, and they take a very military, everybody is standing at attention, and they walk in a marching fashion to their planes. They all get on their planes in unison. They start their planes, they fly their planes, and the same thing is coming back. They all march together back to a point where they then take the at ease and go about their business. Every one of those, every aspect of that is videotaped. And then the debrief, every pilot will go around and identify where they think they could have done better, maybe a mistake that they made, maybe a slight error, but they don't call them mistakes or errors. They call them safeties, because the greatest value they can deliver to each other is to fly those planes within an envelope of safety. So when they are reviewing quite literally everything about that flight, it's always in the context of safety. So when a pilot says, I recognize this as a safety for me, he's quite literally saying, this was an error on my part. And they conclude the discussion with, I will fix my safety. So they've taken that word, simple word, safety, and they've embedded it into the language of their culture. And it's part of their DNA. I'll give you another example. I'll go back to the same healthcare organization I've referenced. Safety DNA, both procedurally, but also in terms of their language. Because I happen to get my healthcare done there. I sometimes will count the number of times I will hear that word safe or safety, and it's embedded in so much of what they do that it's a daily reminder. Oh, my job as a practitioner is to make sure my patient is safe. And that's built in the organization. It just becomes part of their DNA. So one of the things I'm talking to people about more and more, and I'm listening for it more and more, is when organizations are looking to transform themselves, what kind of language do they embed in the organization to reinforce what they're trying to do within their transformation? And when I have found that, it's really quite stunning how they will take a simple word, let's say mentor, and they will begin to use it and they embed it into everyday conversation because it reminds them of what is the most important thing we're doing in the organization. The other thing that I talk a lot about, and it's not a popular subject, but that's rules. Every organization has rules. Most organizations have too many. Most organizations, I would say, don't even understand their rules. But one of the things I found when organizations are going through a transformation is that somehow, some way, they have some kind of an activity where they identify their rules, which ones work, which ones don't. And if they want to empower their people for the kind of change that they're looking for, they give the power of those rules to the people who are going to actually be working. So one of my favorite books on the subject of systems thinking is a book by Danella Meadows. And she says in the book, if you want to understand the deepest malfunctions of an organization, look at its rules and who has power over them. So I'll give you one example. It's actually in my book. A elementary school principal came into the school, and it was by any measure a mess. The prior principal had basically been run out of town by the teachers union. Lots of infighting between the staff. A lot of blame. Everybody was blaming everybody else for whatever that went wrong. And one of the first things that she did, which was, I thought, absolutely brilliant, was she got her staff together at the beginning of the year, including the custodians and the janitors, probably 75, 80 people in a room. And she said, let's identify all of our rules. So they spent 3 or 4 hours going through, well, we have a rule that says this. Maybe we should have had a rule that says that. Basically, they had an unwritten rule that says it's okay to yell at somebody. And so when they got, actually the way she described it to me, when the room got quiet, I said, okay, now let's rewrite our own rules. And so then they spent several hours going through. Everybody had an opportunity to speak. They had ideas up on, poster paper up on walls. And she allowed her staff to create the rules of how they would all engage with each other, rules how they would engage with their students, rules about how they would engage with their students' families, and eventually even rules about how they would engage with the various neighborhood groups that made up that little community. And I thought that was brilliant on in a number of ways. One, she gave her staff enormous power, the power to create the operating rules of how they would all work together. A lot of people would find that really scary to give that kind of power over. We talk about empowerment all the time. Well, what does that actually mean? In that case, she empowered her staff to create the operating rules of how that school was going to function. It was brilliant in the sense that now, when she had to have a difficult conversation with one of her staff, she could pull out this team charter that had a summary of all these rules that they had signed and say, okay, you're not behaving according to the charter that we had developed and you had signed it. Are you taking yourself off of this team, or should we talk about maybe you going on to a different location? Which is a really nice way of saying you need to either change your behavior or leave, because you're not going to be part of this team. One of the results of that was that within 5 years, that school had gone from the lowest performing school in a district of 25,000 students to the highest performing school in that same district, as measured by academic achievement of their students. Plus, that school was like a community gathering place where parents who were not entirely, but it was a very ethnically, it was a very mixed school. But and there's a large segment of the population of the school where education was not valued. Educators were seen as people who were not approachable. All of a sudden, that school became like the community gathering place where parents felt free to come to that school, improve their own education, get some computer training for themselves, meet teachers who were there to help their children. And it really became a gathering place for the entire community. And one thing that we know for sure is that academic achievement is best achieved when education is a community enterprise.
Absolutely. I mean, I was just listening, very fascinated, because what this reminds me, or what came to mind, is when you said, that is very scary, letting go of that power, because you don't know what the outcome is if you delegate the rulemaking to your team. And I was sort of reminded of Campbell's hero's journey, where you have to enter the unknown, which is always a scary place because you don't know what will be riches, great rewards. And it seems to be part of the change process in a cultural sense, is that you have to open up that space, which is scary and unknown, for culture and new norms and values to be created in the first place. So if you want to have some shit, you gotta open that door up into the dark void, basically, with this kind of courage, which she showed, to say, I still believe something good is going to come out of this. I believe in you as a team, and something good came out of it. But so that is very, very fascinating to see that. I mean, we know that crisis it plays a big role in leadership development and also personal development, but you can basically instill that crisis in a meaningful way and in a direct fashion. Say, okay, this is basically a crisis. We don't know what we're going to do, but I believe something good is going to come out of that. We walk together into the. There will be light at the end of this tunnel. So I think that's really interesting. Yeah.
Well, to that point, one of the things that people who are in like a 12-step recovery program, one of the major tenets of those programs is you never want to waste a crisis or a pain. That human crisis, human pain can be used for good and personal growth. And I think the same is true in organizational crisis. You could let the crisis kill you, or you could use that crisis to really transform the organization and the value that's going to be delivered to your customers as well as your employees. And but you're right, it does take, I think, a lot of courage for executives to let loose of that power, to let go of some of that. Even one of the things that I found in these what I call high impact organizations is that they actually coach and train their leaders and managers not to become problem solvers. So most of us, if we're in any kind of a leadership position at all, we sort of we get there by our ability to solve problems. Well, some of the best organizations in the world go the opposite direction. They don't want their leaders and managers to solve problems, because when they do, they're taking away the opportunity for an employee to learn and to grow and to gain self-confidence. So if I was to come to you and say, Luke, I've got a problem with this production program, this process, what do I do? And you're to say, well, oh, Dan, that's easy. Let me fix it for you. Well, you have just taken away from me the opportunity to grow both personally and professionally. You've just told me, oh, I'm too stupid to figure out how to fix that problem myself. However, if you were to take the opposite approach and say, well, let's think about that problem together, and maybe you help me frame the problem, maybe you help me understand who are the other people that are going to be affected by that problem, and maybe you say, maybe you should talk to so-and-so and so-and-so, maybe you should talk to this manager over here, and together come up with a creative solution. What you've just done is empowered me to do something really valuable and important. And when I walk out of your office, I'm feeling better about myself. Yeah, maybe I'm a little nervous that I might do the wrong thing. But if Luke says, Dan, I know that the decision you make is going to be right and appropriate, you've just given me the self-confidence that I have value here. I can grow personally and professionally. Luke trusts me. Luke sees the value in me. And I like the fact that I'm now working in your organization, and Luke is not my boss, but Luke has now just become kind of my mentor. And that's a wonderful place as an employee. That's a wonderful place to be.
Right. And although this is also a wonderful place to be with you in this podcast and recording, we promised each other at the beginning to limit this to 45 minutes or an hour. And unfortunately, the time is up. And for this time, I hope that we don't need another couple of years to see each other again, but we'll do this sooner. So maybe just to sign off, a couple of, what are your plans? When is your PhD finished? When can we talk about that, for example?
Well, I probably got another 3 or 4 years to go. And it really has been a eye-opening experience on, any number of levels. I wake up most of the morning thinking, now, why am I doing this? But the sort of that academic intellectual challenge has been just stunning. But Luke, there's also a very personal aspect to it as well, in this sense that every day I'm battling with the usual doubts and fears that we all face when we step out into the unknown a little bit, when we step out into a field that's like, I'm not comfortable out here. And as nervous as that makes me feel every day, at the end of the day, I go home and thinking, okay, I just beat that back a little bit. And I'm really enjoying the challenge. And it's not without its scary moments, for sure. But it's at the same time, it's really quite thrilling.
Well, thanks a lot for sharing all of this with us, and what should I say? All the best on your adventure. I think
Yeah,
that's the.
and see you next time.
See you next time.